Shalom Aleichem. We're going to continue the Chatzar Yosef class. Shana Tova for all those who are reviewing. Hashem should bless us with a very blessed year, endless blessings, only good things. B'ezrat Hashem. We should fulfill our potentials to its fullest. B'ezrat Hashem. That's what we're here for. We are learning chapter 9 in our Sefer, the Chatzar Yosef, Court Order of Yosef. It's available. Anyone who wants a copy, please email me at my name, yosefzayrov@gmail.com. It's available in some stores locally as well. Okay, we're on page 95. We're talking about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. I'm just going to read the Gemara again, as is our custom, and then we'll go jump right into page 95, Chatzar Yosef. Gemara says, Abba Sikra was the leader of the Bar Yonim, the Zela group of Yerushalayim. He was the son of the sister of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the biggest chacham of the time, the spiritual leader. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai sent a message to him, saying, "Come to me in secret." He came. Now remember, the context is that Rome is besieging the remnants of Jerusalem right now, and the people inside Jerusalem are starving for 3 years. And there's a lot of infighting inside as well. There's a lot of divisiveness amongst the Jews themselves. Abba Sikra is the head of one group, they were the gangsters who were running everything. They're called the Bar Yonim. They're running all the gates and all that stuff. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was the spiritual leader, was the leader of the rabbinic group. So he sent a message to his nephew, to Abba Sikra. Abba Sikra said, "Let's meet in secret." He came over, they met in secret. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said to him, "Until when will you continue to do this and kill everyone through starvation?" Meaning, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai wanted to go negotiate with the Romans to save whatever he could. But the Bar Yonim did not even think that was a possibility. They wanted to fight. Abba Sikra said to him, "What can I do? For if I say something to them," meaning to the other Bar Yonim, "they will kill me." Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said to him, "Prepare for me a method so that I can come out of the city. It is possible that I can arrange some small salvation through negotiation." Abba Sikra said to him, "Pretend to be sick and have everyone come and ask about how you're doing, your welfare, as if you're on the brink of death, and bring something rotten like a dead carcass of a dead animal and place it near you so they will think you have died. Then have your students enter to you, to your quarters, meaning so where you are, and to bring you to burial. Fake your death pretty much. And let no one else come in so that they do not notice that you are still light, since they know the difference. They know that a living person is lighter than a dead person." Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai did so. He followed the plan. And Rabbi Eliezer, his student, entered to him from one side, and Rabbi Yehoshua entered from the other side. They carried him. When they arrived to the entrance of the city, to the entrance of the gate of the city from the inside, the guards, who were the Bar Yonim, wanted to stab him to check if he was really dead. Abba Sikra said to them, "Don't do it. They will say that they stabbed their rabbi if you do this." The guards then wanted to push him, feel him around. Abba Sikra said to him, "They will say that they pushed their rabbi, that they disrespect him." So they opened the gate and he was taken out. That was the Gemara. All the questions we brought up last time, they are written on page 94. Anyway, now we're going to some depth to try to uncover what exactly the Gemara is trying to teach us here on many different levels. Page 95. Now again, this is a real story. It's a historical story. It really happened. But the way it was handed over, the way it was written by the Chachamim, teaches, the mashal is the parable, an example that didn't necessarily happen. Here, this actually happened. But the way, the details that they just chose to write, each teach you a certain message, a certain deeper point that the Chachamim clothe with the story. So therefore, that's our job, to try to uncover the depth behind the story. Page 95. We started going into the Chatzar Yosef last week. We did like a couple of paragraphs. I think we left off on this.
No, we did one paragraph in the Chatzar Yosef.
I think we did two.
No?
We did two. We did a second. We'll do it again. Why is it that the students did not know the difference in weight of a dead body versus a live body? Right. So remember, Abba Sikra said that you should have your students carry you and not have anyone else carry you. And he said the reason is because that they don't know the difference. They won't be able to tell whether you're alive or dead. But if someone else would carry, if the zealots would carry your casket, they could tell that you're not dead, because they know the difference. They know the live body weighs lighter. The simple answer is that the zealots, the Bayonim, frequented dead bodies at a much higher rate. Right? They're constantly carrying dead bodies out of the city. As the Ben Yehoiada mentioned, that was their job. They used to, whenever somebody died and started rotting, and they couldn't handle the stench inside the city, they would take them out. And so that was their job. They knew what a dead body felt like. And they likely even killed people in skirmishes that they had with the other political groups that got out of hand. Therefore, they knew from experience that a dead body is heavier than a live body. Meanwhile, the students the students of the yeshiva, Rabbi Yochanan's students, they spent most of their time studying Torah, and likely did not come across dead bodies as often as the other ones. So although there is a halachic principle though, in halakha, that the students likely came across in their studies, it's called Chai Noseh et Atzmo. A living person carries itself. In a sense that a living person, when being carried, feels more manageable to the carrier. Because the one being carried, the person being carried, if he's alive, he's using his muscles, right? It's an automatic neurological thing. It's called proprioception. Your inner ear apparatus helps you balance, and it controls all your muscles in such a way where the muscles are used to balance, to maintain the balance of the two people, centering the weight, making it easier for the person to carry him. A dead body, on the other hand, does not have this sense of proprioception, and becomes what we call dead weight. That's what people call it, dead weight. But when you try to pick up a dead body or somebody who's acting dead completely, it's very difficult. It's like straight, just a sack of meat they're trying to pick up, and it's much more difficult. And therefore, it's more cumbersome, more difficult on the carrier.
So acting dead is not the same thing?
Yeah, you could do that. If you just put in your head that you're not going to move any limbs of your body whatsoever, and then have someone else pick you up, it's more difficult. It's much more difficult for the person to pick you up that way.
But it's still not the same as actually being dead.
No, it's not the same because even when you're alive and you're playing dead, you're still not really dead, and therefore your nerves and your brain are working at a certain level anyway. Right, whether you like it or not, you can't turn that off. Right, you can play dead to a degree. Yes. So this concept comes up in a lot of different places in Torah, such as the laws of carrying a child in the Reshut Rabim, the public domain, on Shabbat. Carrying in the public domain on Shabbat is forbidden. It's asur. Mideoraita, if there's no eruv, there's no proper, eruv, which I don't know how to translate eruv. It's special setup that the sages of the city would put to make the city like a closed space, like a closed room, so to speak.
The concept of eruv, is that like a more recent thing?
No.
Or they had eruvin before?
There's Gemara Masechet Eruvin. Of course.
I'm saying, how did they have eruvin before?
There's so many different types of eruvin. Eruvin is much more complicated than you ever thought. It's extremely detailed.
The string method that we use now, that's modern.
That's one option that was more recently.
Was the mixing bread, right?
Again, I don't want to get into it. It's extremely long, and the concept of eruv means le'arbev, means to mix. The point is trying to mix domains into one domain. Trying to mix multiple private domains and a public. Right? You cannot do eruv on a public domain. You can only do eruv on private domains and on derabanan domains, quasi domains that are not public or private, which is not allowed to carry there on a rabbinic level. So the eruv tries to mix it up, make it seem like one space, make it viewed as one space, so that you can carry along there. Because the issue is going from the private domain to a public domain, or vice versa. A public domain, however, if it's actually a public domain, cannot be. Eruv doesn't work on it at all. You're never allowed to carry in public domain. Right. So now the question is, what is a public domain? It's really a huge argument in the poskim.
People pass.
Yes. What is a public domain? It's a huge argument. The most lenient opinion is what most people follow, which is that you have to have 600,000 people passing by in that spot on a daily basis. If you don't have that, then it's considered the rabbinic domain, and therefore it can be eruved. right? And a lot of whoever does carry on Shabbat relies on the eruv and relies on the opinion that our streets are all like that. Since you don't have 600,000 people passing on one day, then our streets are all considered a rabbinic domain. Huh?
Why is that considered a lenient opinion?
Because the strict opinion is that is not a requirement. As long as the place is 16 amot wide, which is about 25 feet wide, without any walls, it's considered a public domain. The number of people is not a requirement to the strict opinion. That's the Rambam, and that's one understanding of the Shulchan Aruch. It's an argument where does the Shulchan Aruch himself hold, because he brings both laws in different places. So again, it's quite complicated. The point is on a Torah level, forget rabbinic level for example, on a Torah level, if someone carried in a public domain, full-fledged public domain, for the length of about 4 amot, which is about 6 to 8 feet, picked it up, carried 6 to 8 feet, stopped, and put it on with the intention to put it on the floor, even though he didn't put it on the floor. He had the intention to put it on the floor. That's already considered like he put it on the floor. That whole act that I just described, picking it up, walking that amount, and stopping, with the intention to put it down, is considered a biblical sin of breaking Shabbat on the highest degree. Now, the question is, what does he have to carry? If he carries a simple, inanimate object, for sure. What if he carries a live object? Or if he carries a person, human being? Is he liable for breaking Shabbat on the Torah level? Answer is no. Because chai noseh et atzmo. Because a living person carries himself. Which means this guy didn't carry the person that he carried. The person that he carried did some carrying of himself to himself, like we just explained, because of the proprioception, the whole neurological thing. And therefore, he cannot be considered that he carried that person. Now, unless the person is dead, then it is. Then yes, it's a problem. The question becomes what?
You can't pick up a kid on the Shabbat.
Huh? So hold on. So the question becomes what about a child? A child, we brought all this in the note 1 on the bottom. A child, it depends on if he knows how to carry himself. If he knows how to carry himself, if he knows how to walk, then he's in this same category of chai noseh et atzmo. And it's just like any other live person that you would have carried, and therefore he is exempt on a Torah level. Now again, on a rabbinic level, it's still not allowed to carry a person or a child who knows how to walk in a public domain. Still not allowed on a rabbinic level because it's too close and people may end up carrying something else. But the person is not liable to death penalty or bringing a sacrifice or anything like that because it's not on a Torah level prohibition. Nevertheless, if the child does not know how to walk, and it needs to be carried in order to be locomoted from one place to another. Therefore, if you carried him, or a person carried him, in a public domain, he would be liable on a Torah level as well, because he's not chai noseh et atzmo. He doesn't carry himself. That's one of the places where this law comes up. I don't want to go too much into it, but that's the point here. So, based on this, that being the case, how did the students not know? The students study this. They know that a live person feels lighter than the dead person because of chai noseh et atzmo. If that's the case, why did Abba Sikra say to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, don't let your students carry you because they won't know the difference? I'm sorry. He said, make sure your students carry you and not someone else, because your students won't know the difference whether you're alive or dead based on how heavy you are.
Because they learned it, but practicing it is different.
Exactly. That was our answer last week. That's our answer. It's still the same. I didn't change the book. It says, the answer is that the students only learned this theoretically, but they did not experience in practice the weight of a dead body as frequently as the Baryonim did, and experience trumps didactics, which means, classes and theoretics, study class kind of thing, and hearsay. So, experience is always better, and that's why he said that. That's the simple answer. Simple answer is always good, but we like to delve a little deeper in this class, as you like to know. And that's why we're going to the next chapter, paragraph. On a more profound level, and this is kind of hard to explain, actually in the next paragraph, I learned it once with somebody else, and it was hard for them to understand, and therefore I put in some of my own notes here to try to explain it better. I'll do my best, bear with me. A living human being is the fusion of two elements. Okay, we're getting a little deep here. Two basic elements constitute a human being. The body and the soul, physical and the spiritual elements, okay? This is understood.
Would you say it's 50-50?
We're not getting into that now. The body is actually 100-100. The body is a physical structure, and therefore it is more dense. more overtly physical. The soul, however, is part of God from on high, from above. Much more refined, infinitely less dense. It's light, right? And not physical at all. When they are fused together in the creation of a human being, there's a certain equilibrium of density that becomes reached. That's just basic chemistry, right? But here we're putting some spirituality in there. But the point is, when you have two different elements, chemistry as well, and let's say you have two different liquids that are soluble with each other, right? So they're not like both, they're both, let's say either they're both water soluble or they're both non-water soluble, which is like oily. For example, take water and you take alcohol, okay? And you mix them together, two liquids, alcohol liquid, ethanol, and water, H2O. There's going to be a certain reaction that happens. That's probably a bad example. With air, you create certain acid. But bottom line, you take two liquids that can mix together. Okay, I'll give you an example, more simple. You take milk and you take coffee. I like that one. Everyone likes milk and coffee. Those are two different liquids. They have their own densities because they have their own constituents and properties and proteins. And one of those properties is density. When you mix them together, you get a equilibrium amongst them. You get what's called a mixture, homogeneous mixture, which means you can't tell the difference between them. They mix into each other purely. That's a new liquid now. That's called coffee with milk. And that is going to have a different density than coffee by itself and milk by itself. It's going to be the middle of, let's say, for example, throw numbers out there. Let's say the definite density of coffee is 1 and the density of milk is 1.5. Again, I'm just throwing this out, it's not exactly. You mix it together, the density is now going to be 1.25. If they're the same quantities. Exactly, let's say a liter of this and a liter of that. You understand? There's an equilibrium that's reached. Same thing here. You have a body and you have a soul. When they come together, an equilibrium of density is reached because this is very not dense and this is very dense. You put them together, you get an equilibrium. But when death occurs and the soul departs from its partnership with the body, now the soul comes out. What remains is the overwhelming physicality and denseness of the body alone, by itself. Right? Because remember, the body was very dense, the soul is very not dense. You mix them together, you get an equilibrium. Once you remove the very not dense thing, this comes back, reverts back to this density, to its original deep density and heaviness, making the body seem much heavier to carry. Abba Sikra's statement in our Gemara is coming to teach a great secret. What was his words in the Gemara? It was like this. And then have your students enter to you to bring you to burial, and let no one else come in so that they do not notice that you are still light, since they know that a living person is lighter than a dead person. That's what he said. When he said they know, he was talking about his friends, the Baryonim, the other gangsters. They know the difference. The implication here is that Abba Sikra insisted that specifically the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would carry him, because whether he was dead or not, they would not be able to tell the difference. Why? Let me explain. This is because the Torah teacher-student relationship, the relationship that a Torah teacher has with his Torah student, it's such that when the teacher dies, a spiritual portion of him that leaves his body in death enters and reanimates to a degree in his students. A teacher can always be, is always sort of displayed to a point in his students, whether they like it or not. Yes, because the teacher imbues some of his essence into the student himself, implants some of himself into the student, right? And what is that he's implanting? It's a spiritual connection. It's a spiritual drop off, so to speak, that he's putting part of himself into his student. And therefore, thus, the increase in density of the body of the late or dead teacher becomes compensated by the decrease in density in his students due to the extra dose of spirituality they receive from his soul. So it's like a kind of kind of a mathematical system over here. What's happening here is
Equal out the equation.
exactly it equals out, because when the teacher dies, his body becomes denser, right? So why? Because something came out of him. But whatever came out of him, that spirituality, some of it goes into the student. So the student becomes less dense than he was by himself. And the body became more dense. Those two things they cancel out. Do you understand? They cancel out. So when the students carry the body of their dead teacher, when you consider the whole system of the students and the dead body of the teacher, it's the same numbers. It just moved within each other. This moved here, but the whole thing is the same. That's why students can't feel it.
But he's not really dead. In this case.
Right.
It would still be the same.
Whether he died or not, exactly, it's the same numbers. Whether he died or not, you see the difference? It's the same numbers. It's kind of a deep idea. It's hard to explain. I hope you guys understood it.
What's the point of this idea?
So this is the depth I'm trying to reveal of what Abba Sikra was saying. He's saying, let your students come to carry you because they won't know the difference. Whether you're dead or not, they won't know.
So he wasn't saying that they wouldn't know.
If you're dead, you're not. But if you were dead, some of you will go into them, equal out. You're not dead, same numbers.
So
They can't tell.
He's here also teaching the student-teacher relation.
Yes, he's revealing this depth between that exists in a student-teacher relationship.
But they never carried him before. They wouldn't know.
It doesn't matter. It still would be the same way. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the
They wouldn't
same.
know though.
What? What do you mean? Say it again.
They wouldn't
They have nothing
know.
to compare to. You're saying?
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't matter. It would still be technically the same way. If I become, let's say I carry you now, then whatever, I become lighter, you become heavier. It just equals out because the same amount you became heavier, you became 5 pounds heavier, I became 5 pounds less dense, which gives me whatever, I float more, whatever it is.
Wait,
So it equals
all we're
out.
trying to bring out here is that Abba Sikra, in the Gemara's words, was hinting to this concept. Not necessarily applying specifically to them in this particular situation, just hinting to the words hint to this concept. The words of the Gemara. That's the point. So if they were to carry his body, because of this balancing out, the overall density of the system would remain constant, like we explained. This is the power of the Torah sage. His influence remains in the world forever via his students. We learn this concept from Yaakov Avinu himself, who, as the Maharsha mentioned, right? Maharsha mentioned this before in last week's lecture. He instructed that his sons should carry his body to be buried with his fathers in Haran. And we bring you the piece over here. We bring you a Gemara actually. This is a Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit. Very interesting Gemara. What does it say? I'll read you the English. After they had eaten, Rabbi Yitzchak said to Rab Nachman, to Chachamim, and Rabbi Yochanan as well, that Rabbi Yochanan said as follows. This is the teaching he says. He says, our patriarch, our forefather, Yaakov, did not die. Rab Nachman asked him, so before I get to that, it says nowhere in the Torah does it say that Yaakov died. By Abraham Avinu it says, and he expired and he died. By Yitzchak Avinu it says, and he expired and he died. By Yaakov Avinu, it just says he expired. It doesn't say he died. It says he expired and he lifted his legs up to the bed. That's all.
Because he went up to Shemayim in his book.
And there's actually a Gemara Masech Sotah that we did before that says when Esav was trying to stop the whole commotion of Yaakov being carried to his burial place in the cave, Marat Machpelah. Hold on. So Hushim, the son of Dan, came and he killed, hit the head of Esav really hard, and Esav's head fell by the feet of Yaakov, and it says Yaakov smiled.
Yaakov or Yitzhak?
Yaakov. This is later on. It's not in the Torah. This is in the Gemara.
Wait. Didn't Esau die when Yitzhak died?
No, absolutely not.
Wasn't his head buried with Yitzhak?
When Yitzchak died?
His father.
When Yaakov? No, you're mixing the story. You're mixing the story.
They died the same day?
Then that, I don't know if it was the same day because Yaakov had to travel. They had to travel him all the way up there. It was not too long after that. But Esav, like I said, look at the story of Masechet Sotah. Esav was killed by Hushim, Yaakov's grandson.
By Usher's son.
Whose son?
Usher's
No,
son.
Dan. Dan's son.
The death grandson.
His name is not Usher. His name is Asher.
Usher.
He would know if son is not.
I know.
Usher. Okay. So, the Gemara Masechet Tanit says that Rabbi Yitzchak saying to Rav Nachman, Yaakov Avinu never died. Rav Nachman asked him, oh yeah? And was it for no reason, for naught, that the eulogizers eulogized him, and the embalmers embalmed him, embalmed his body? The Torah says these things. And the buriers buried him? The Torah says he was embalmed, he was eulogized, he was buried. They were doing it to a live person? So Rabbi Yitzchak answered him, I am only expounding a verse. He said, what do you want from me? I'm just telling you, I have what the verses tell me. I'm not trying to tell you something crazy. This is what the Pasukim say. What do you want? This is the Torah says. As it is stated, it says in the Pasuk over there, you do not fear Yaakov, my servant, says Hashem. Neither be dismayed. Don't be upset. Israel, that's his other name. That's Yaakov's other name. For behold, I, God is speaking, will save you from afar and your seed from the land of captivity. That's the prophet Jeremiah 30:10. This verse juxtaposes, meaning it puts Yaakov's name right next to his seed, his offspring. Why? Just as his seed, his offspring, is in life, meaning they're still alive to this day, so too Yaakov is in life, is alive. That is what the Gemara teaches in Masechet Ta'anit.
Let me ask you that. He's saying, what do you want from me? I'm just telling you what the Torah said, right?
Yeah.
But we, as the readers and the commentators, are assuming that because it didn't say Yaakov died after it said he expired,
Yes.
we are assuming that he didn't die.
That's not an assumption. It's a very strong way to read
No,
the Torah.
but-
The Torah is very specific. It's a very, very
Yeah,
specific.
but
Every
the
letter and every
Torah-
word.
but the-
So since the Torah never mentions explicitly that Yaakov died,
But the Torah-
therefore you cannot say he
But the
died.
Torah mentioned that he was embalmed
Okay,
and
so
buried.
so
So that means nothing?
look at Rashi.
I don't.
Look at the bottom, note number 2. Again, this is a whole topic that requires analysis. We're just trying to bring a point here that I'll tell you in a second.
I know what Rashi. I read the commentaries in the Chumash. I understand.
So let me just read it for the viewers at home with your permission, Mike. Tosafot over there says in Tanit 5b, that's the page. Tosafot there make note that the Torah never says Yaakov died. Rather, it says that Yaakov expired. Rashi in this Gemara over there comments that the embalmers and eulogizers thought he was dead, but he actually wasn't. Now what that means is a lot.
He played Houdini. He was the original.
The simple answer to this, the nice, simple answer. I'm just trying to bring the simple answer,
See what you want to
which is that Yaakov never died, which means that his legacy and his purpose, his footprint on the world is not dead. That's us to this day.
But that's the same with exactly. Same with Abraham Yitzhak.
Yes, but Yaakov is credited with being the closest father of the nation because he had 12 tribes. You understand? Avraham Yitzhak just had one that eventually led.
Original.
I understand, but he's also the father of Christianity. He's also, not the father of Christianity. Other nations came from Abraham, Arabs, Christians, right? And then from Yitzchak also, other nations, white people, Esav, Europeans came from Yitzchak. Yaakov, 100% purebred Am Yisrael.
Is that an old fact?
And that still lives to this day. All the other nations have been mixed. Abraham's side nations of the Arabs, Yitzchak's side nations through Esav of the Europeans, complete mixture of salad. You don't know who's who now. You can't link them back. Today, but we have Kohanim today that can link themselves back to Aaron Kohen. You understand?
I'm a
Levi.
Levi.
You link yourself back to the Levi, whose father was Yaakov. You understand? That's alive. That's a simple answer. There's deeper answers.
Can I ask you a
Yes.
Also, it doesn't say everyone that died in the Torah. Every character mentioned in the Torah doesn't say that they died.
Every major character that you know in the Torah, once they go, the Torah says they go. Yosef, it says he died. Moshe, it says he died. Aharon, Miriam, they died. Yaakov doesn't say he died.
Esau says he died.
It doesn't say that Esav died,
Head was thrown out.
but the Gemara says he died. The Gemara says.
So
Yeah.
because
You didn't pass anything wrong.
You know, like
they
they-
expired. You didn't
so
pass
look.
anything wrong.
they say the Cohens because it's passed down from the father, they're the Cohen gene.
Yeah.
So it should be the same thing as a Levi, right? Because passed down from the father.
Theoretically, if they were to do that
So
trick.
I'm supposed to have a Levi gene.
You have to understand, Kohanim are also Leviim. Kohanim are from the tribe of Levi as well. So you can have a lot of mixtures there, overlaps. Okay. So what's the point we're trying to bring over here? Back on page 96. Thus Yaakov lives through his seed into whom he indoctrinated the electricity of the Torah. Look at that powerful line. The same applies to a Torah scholar and his students. Do you understand? This is the point I'm trying to show you. It is the teacher who forges a portion of his students' souls, their living component. As the Torah testifies regarding the father of fathers, the teacher of teachers, Avraham Avinu, as it says, and the nefesh, the soul that they made in Haran, right? This is in Bereshit 12:5. We brought this before. It says when Abraham was first introduced to us in the Torah in Lech Lecha, it said he lived in Haran over there, and who else lived with him? The soul that he made. What do you mean the soul that he made? Abraham and Sarah, his wife Sarah, reacclimated the people of their generation with their Creator. Right? That verse refers to the converts, so to speak, the people that they brought away from idolatry to worshiping Hashem, the one God. And it's called a soul that they made. They made that soul. What do you mean? God makes all the souls. We're talking about Abraham made the soul? The answer is like this. Since Abraham and Sarah reacclimated the people of their generation with their Creator, taught them the truth about the world and the existence altogether, and as such, it is considered in a sense that they made / created these people themselves. What does that mean? They put a piece of themselves in them, remade them, rejuvenated them, gave them life.
Wait, what were the two rabbis again?
Two rabbis?
They carried out Rabbi...
Oh, that was Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. We're not there yet. Hold on a second. Hold your horses. So which part of them did they create? And it says over here, the soul, the nefesh, the verse says, meaning the living spiritual component within them, the infinitely non-densifying portion of them, in a deep sense, was donated from the supercharged counterparts of their teachers, Abraham and Sarah. That's what happens.
What happened to those?
They were, what do you mean, Abraham's camp? They were part of Abraham's camp. What happened to them later on, we don't have any record of them, but I assume there are at least Ger Toshav. Ger Toshav means, Gentiles who properly observe the 7 Noahide laws.
Wouldn't they want to join the Jewish nation?
There wasn't a Jewish nation yet.
Well, eventually, like their kids.
But no.
Maybe many of them. I don't know. Maybe many of them covered it. It's possible.
Right?
We don't have any
So
record. I'm
Noah,
not sure.
Like if Noah exists today, he's not Jewish.
No, absolutely not. A Noahide is just another term for any person who lived after Noah, which is basically everybody.
No, but there are people who only believe in the 7 Noahide laws.
That's a certain cult, a religion that came out. Yeah,
But they're not Jewish.
No, absolutely not. No,
You can't consider them Jewish.
no, absolutely, of course not.
Even though they could come from Noah.
So what? Doesn't matter. The Jews don't come from Noah. Jews come from Yaakov Avinu. Then I just finished explaining that.
Noah.
Yes, but Noah had many other branches of people that came from him. Every other person in the world is from Noah.
Strictly Jews come from Yaakov. Strictly Jews. Noah came
Yes.
from
Okay, continuing further now. Let us see the prodigious advice. Prodigious is a fancy word for wise. Given by Chazal in the very first Mishnah of Pirkei Avot. Very first Mishnah of Pirkei Avot. What does it say over there? Famous Mishnah. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Yehoshua. Yehoshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets transmitted it to the men of the Great Assembly. They said 3 things, 3 famous teachings, the men of the Great Assembly. Be patient in the administration of justice. When you judge, I mean, not only, this is really for an actual judge on the panel, but it applies to everybody as well. Be patient before you judge. Second one, he'emidu, which means raise or establish many disciples, many students. And number 3, make a fence for the Torah. Make a fence so you don't transgress the Torah. The word he'emidu, which is the second teaching, establish.
Isn't a person who's supposed to establish disciples?
Students,
right?
yeah.
Isn't it supposed to be a leader of some sort?
Sure.
A rabbi?
Yeah, who says it?
Not any regular person.
Everyone is a leader in their own degree, in their own level. What do you mean? Everybody leads something. You have kids? You have kids?
Yeah.
You're a leader of some sort.
They're not my disciples.
Why not?
They're my children, my legacy.
Okay, disciple, your children could be your disciples. So the disciple is someone that you teach, someone you indoctrinate, someone that you guide is your disciple. Understand?
So
you don't know, you have a lot of disciples, my friend. A lot. People who come to them with their problems, you know what I'm talking about. They have certain issues that you help them with.
I won't consider disciples.
On a certain level, on a certain degree. Now again, this Mishnah is talking about Torah disciples, Torah leaders, which is the most simple and most important one. But everything else is true as well. Okay, so let's finish this paragraph before we end it today. I want to pick on the word here, imidu. They're not? Because they did it recently?
Would you do it before the fast?
I have to do it. We'll see. The word here, imidu, which is used by a Mishnah to mean raise, establish, the more literal definition of this word is make them stand up. Literally, from the word omed. Omed means stand. La'amod, to stand. He'imidu means make them stand. In other words, give them a leg to stand on. The meaning here is that a Torah leader serves as the pedestal which his students stand on to reach greater heights down the line. The emerging theme here is the preservation and propagation of Torah in its most authentic form through the hurdles of history towards history's final act. The Mishnah begins, this Mishnah we just said, and Pirkei Avot, famous one, it begins by mapping out the hands through which the Torah was first passed down, right? Moshe, etc. God, Moshe, Yoshua. And then it concludes, the Mishnah concludes by teaching how those receiving it, this very precious thing we call the Torah, will be able to perpetuate it further through history. How? By the teacher raising their students such that the students may stand on their own. You've got to create people and students who are going to be independent, who won't rely on you forever, that they can stand on their own. That's what it's midu. That's the ideal way to parent as well. You want to raise a child where you can trust him to go out into this scary, scary world and make the best of it. You understand? This is exactly the theme of our Gemara. Avraham started it all, sacrificing everything for this fancy word. I'm warning you, fancy word. Sacrificing everything for the fructification of the Torah, of the truth of Torah. Fructification has the word fruit in it. It literally means the blossoming, production of Torah. Okay? The men of the Great Assembly took measures to ensure the Torah's survival through a crucial transition in history. Right, what we're talking about there is that the men of the same people that our Mishnah is talking about here, the men of the Great Assembly, and Sheikh Nasir Abdullah, they were the ones who closed prophecy. The Gemara Masechet Yomah speaks about it. They closed prophecy, and that was a huge turning point in history. If you want more on that, look at Rabbi Akiva Tatz's great book on that called As Dawn Ends the Night. He dedicates a whole book explaining every consequence of that decision of closing prophecy and what it ended up being. And so that was such a crucial time in history that since no more prophecy, there's going to be a lot more doubts, a lot more questions. When you have a prophet, you ask him, what does God want? He wants this. Okay, thank you, I'm going home. That's it, it's very simple.
That's if you believe it.
No, there was hard, I mean, there were some fake prophets, but the real prophets were hard to miss. They knew them. You know what I'm saying? They wrote books.
I'm saying you still have to be a believer at that.
Of course, they were all believers. There was no atheists that time.
No, I'm talking about atheists.
So we're talking about believers, not believers. They were all believers of higher energies.
Don't believe in that person.
Oh, okay, there's something else, Mike. The point is that once they closed prophecy, all these doubts started setting into the world. Who do you believe now? What do you do? The sages became the real leaders now. The sages weren't prophets, you know. But they had other powers that trumps, that surpasses prophets. The Gemara speaks about. But that's a whole discussion on its own. But the point is, doubt would set in amongst the people. And nevertheless, how do you keep Torah going? These same people who close prophecy, they taught you in this Mishnah, He'emidu talmidim. Raise up students so they stand on their own. You have to make them such true believers of God's Torah and representatives and agents of it that they can go out in the world and do it on their own. Huh?
The end of it is serious.
End of what? You read the whole chapter?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on a second, man.
It's serious.
And with the deadly Romans lurking outside the already crumbling Jerusalem, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in our Gemara took upon himself the grueling task of rescuing the integrity of the Torah. That's what he was trying to do here, as we'll see in the next chapter, in the next section. And he wanted to propagate it further to future generations as it exists to this day, which he did. He was successful in doing that, as we'll see. So this whole thing is a theme of continuing Torah. That's what Avraham did in his time. He made souls, so to speak. That's what the men of the great assembly are teaching in this Mishnah, and that's what Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is continuing in our Gemara. Are we going to have Arabit?
I texted, I don't know if they respond.
If we do, we should stop here.
I mean, they probably will.
Okay, so with that, it's a good stopping point. The next point is going to delve really deep into a really deep concept, trying to explain why exactly those two students, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, were the ones who had to carry Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, and it really goes into an amazing thing. Don't miss next week. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen, Amen.